Hi, Adam. How you doing today?
I'm doing incredible. You?
Awesome. Me too. So it is summertime, and it's a little warm out here now. And we are actually recording this in the evening. And so, as planned, and this was all your idea, we are going to be moving from the virtual bar out to the virtual campfire. And we are going to tell some scary stories of amazing data breaches and how they happen, basically. So everyone is maybe not scared, but might learn something and learn something they hadn't heard about some of these famous breaches.
Wait, is this campfire also being done in video?
This campfire is being done. This is not our first video, but we did that unboxing. But this is our first regular podcast episode that we're doing video with too. So now everyone can see us all the time.
They can see me in my bathing suit. I put a bathing suit on for this.
Oh, dude, if you're wearing a bathing suit, you're wearing a black T-shirt. Are you like wearing the Three Stooges '30s bathing suit, where it's like a whole outfit? Like,
I can take that to another place, but I'm going to be a good boy today.
please, no, don't take that. We gotta get through this, all right? Okay, now of course we will be drinking for this. That is, that's part of the show at this point. So, I've never actually been camping, believe it or not. But I certainly wouldn't do it without drinking, so I can't imagine. I don't know what the hell else you do in the woods all night. So
I kind of wish I had some marshmallows. I was roasting it by the campfire. It'd be nice.
well, that would be nice. And I know you wanted to do this outdoors, but I'm like, for our first video, maybe we should try something a little simpler technically, besides like, a location shot and outdoor lighting and everything. I don't think we're ready for that. Not even
Yeah.
close.
When we get to our let's make a deal, right? When we
All right.
get
Well,
to our 100th episode, we're going to do it outside by a campfire.
okay, cool. We'll do another campfire. We may do a few before then, but we'll do that one actually outside. We are drinking Scotch today, are we not?
Yes, sir.
And you got the really good stuff. You got the fancy stuff.
Look at
You got the
that.
Blue Label. Wow. Well, what do I got here? I got some Glenlivet. I don't know where I got this from. I'm not a huge Scotch drinker, but
I'm not a
sometimes you got
huge
to do what you got to do.
I'm not a huge drinker at all, but by the time I finish maybe this one glass, I'll be telling stories you don't want to know.
Well, that's the thing. We gotta watch ourselves. But that's the show. We got to be drinking. Whoa, that stuff is strong. I can smell it already. All right.
Cheers. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers, everyone. To the show, to video, to the campfire. There we
Yes,
go.
sir.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
so why
All right.
campfire stories, Joe?
Why campfire stories? Well, they're like, monster stories, scary stories are everything. And, we're going to tell some scary stuff and explain why it's scary, not just so much for the people who experienced it, but what it means to everyone else, which would be kind of interesting. So we'll see. And, we don't try to scare people with security. That's, a lot of people say, oh, we got to scare them and everything. But, hey, this sounded like a good hook, so let's go with it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to be talking about are TTPs that are really important to attacks, and that's a pretty technical term. So, Adam, why don't you take it? You are the more technical guy. Tell
Well,
us what TTPs are.
well, TTPs. It's kind of funny. I don't think it's really new to cybersecurity, but it's basically tactics, techniques, and procedures. How things are done, what people utilize, and how they what protocols they follow in order to compromise something. So in cybersecurity, we have TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And one of those frameworks, which is one of the most well-known frameworks, is MITRE. And that kind of gives you a little bit of an understanding of what the threat actor does and how they go about doing it. And the reason why that's important is when we start looking at some of these compromises, you're going to want to understand how they do it and why do they do it, and how do they go about setting up their victims for these attacks.
Right. Well, that's why we study compromise. Well, we study them because it's fun, because it's scary, and we'd like to say, oh, thank God that wouldn't have happened to us. But kind of more to the point, more seriously, we study them because it is really important to see those techniques. It's not just about would that breach have happened to us, would we fall for that and everything, but what were the hackers doing? And this whole thing about TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, that's a lot of what you get from your intelligence and from these breaches. That's a big reason why they're studied to say, hey, what are the hackers doing now? Because they always have new tricks, and every time we put out a defense, they come out with something around it. So this is always a big area of research, and is really important. And the things we're going to be looking at today, we're talking about are not cutting edge, but they do really illustrate some really interesting ones that we're still worrying about to this day.
And sometimes cutting edge is actually not the best thing, right? Sometimes the basic, simple TTPs are really good. I mean, sometimes you got to go back to basics. Um, it,
Oh,
yeah,
oh yeah. Well, it's like the Statue of Liberty play. It's like you got to be worried about the most advanced stuff and all those things, but you got to make sure you're still protected against some of the classics, so someone can't trick you with one of them. It'd be like, what did they do? That's so old school. A lot of people get hit with old school attacks, and so you got to make sure you got the basics covered, because it's not only a matter of attackers being clever, but there are so many automated scanning systems going on that if you have a weakness, even if it's old one, they're looking for all the old weaknesses. They're going to find them, and you're going to get hit. So you got to deal with them all. It's tough.
and let's not forget about reconnaissance, right?
Right.
There's a lot to learn just by looking at people's profiles, whether it's Facebook, more importantly, probably LinkedIn, and even some of the stuff that's published on websites. When, you and I know, right? When we've spoken to some of these companies that do these red team, blue teams, purple teams, and sometimes they literally just go on somebody's company website to gain intel, to gain reconnaissance information. Like, oh, we use, this vendor or that vendor, or we use this type of product in order to provide great service to our organization. Yet, what you're doing is you're revealing what products you're using, and then those threat actors look for the vulnerabilities in those products. So there's a lot to gain by reconnaissance.
Yeah, absolutely. And reconnaissance is typically the first step of an attack, not even just the technical reconnaissance of doing, scanning and looking for vulnerabilities, but yeah, seeing if you can just Google and say like, hey, this company did a press release or did a testimonial for this security company, so that's what they're using for stuff. I always find it funny, as a security manager. Remember when we get those calls, like someone gets phished or whatever, they get some a scam call, like a business email compromise, and they say, how did that person get my phone number? You know so much about me. And depending on the place you're in, sometimes you say like, it's kind of on our website, or you gave it away in this article a few months ago when you did a talk or something like that. Like, oh yeah, they will use everything they can find.
Especially if you've ever been on the internet looking for a job, your resume is a great
Oh,
source.
totally.
Whether
Yes,
it's
definitely.
back in the day Monster, but now LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn Pro account, whatever they call those accounts, where you're looking for people to fulfill an organization, I'm pretty sure those nation states have those accounts to gain intel.
No, of course, it's easy. So before, let's just backtrack a little bit. You talked about MITRE and the MITRE attack map. MITRE, you might have, it's MITRE. You might have heard of it. It's kind of I think it's a private company, but it's kind of a pseudo government organization. I think the government totally funds it. They do a lot of stuff, mostly defense, as far as I know, and a lot of it is actually security research. And they came out with this great, just taxonomy, which is just this classification of all the different, the stages of an attack and all the different things that hackers will do. It says, they're gonna scan this way, they're gonna use this attack, they're gonna do that, and it's a really convenient way of setting them all out, so that you can say, oh, we see this kind of attack, it's this, it's that, everything. And one of the big things these days is designing your defenses, and maybe you're monitoring around that, so you can see, hey, I got everything covered. Because it's just like, this whole big thing where you can say, yeah, I got everything covered, or, that's not important, that is important, helps you make decisions. So that's what MITRE is. It's, not some kind of soy you get from the Home Depot or nothing. We're not just making this stuff up.
Oh yeah, it's on a Midas store. Though I would take a Midas store if somebody's willing to give me one. But I'm actually looking at the map, and I'm looking at it goes from reconnaissance to resource development to initial access, and then all the way to the end to exfiltration and impact. And the reason why that's important is if you understand what the threat actors are doing, and we both know this, right? Then you can use certain products to kind of fill that gap. And what's also interesting is some of these EDR and security companies have their own additional TTPs that they add in addition to what the MITRE framework has. It's very, very encouraging. A lot of products are starting to integrate to help, I guess, stitch together all these products from MITRE. So it's really, really a good thing to learn and understand.
Right. And, Adam, you just mentioned something. You kind of really quickly went through the stages of an attack. See, this stuff is so natural to us. We got to remember not everyone knows this. Kind of what Adam described is the stages of an attack from we were talking about reconnaissance, gathering information. Then there's I'm doing this off the top of my head, but then there's the exploitation. You get in. Then there's lateral movement. Then, there's finding a way out, getting persistence, which basically means making sure you can get back in, making your connection there persistent. Then there is a term we've used before, data exfiltration, fancy word for getting the data out that you want to use, and things like covering your tracks. So there's all these different stages of an attack that an attacker will go through, and kind of the stages of the attack, and they're also often called, the kill chain, which is a little optimistic sometimes. But the idea is that, well, if you can disrupt one of them or one or more of them, then the attack will fail. It's typically not so simple because attackers are tough and they will try other things and move around. But those are some of the things, we look at just to start to give you a feel for, how we look at the attackers. It's not the case of, you got to remember from their perspective, they don't just say, oh, this company, we see it has this vulnerability, so we do that, and then boom, we're done and we're on. No, they have to take a whole bunch of steps to compromise you. That's a little more complicated. And when they go in, they are to a certain extent making it up as they go along. They got to see what works, what doesn't, what they have to work with. And as they're moving around the network, we also call that living off the land. Where maybe, they're not introducing malware or their own tools, but they just get into the network and they start to see what tools you have. It's like if someone breaks into your house and they start saying, okay, let me move around, start looking for a safe, and then go into your garage and basement and say, okay, what kind of tools have you got to open it up? They'll do stuff like that.
So that's it's interesting you bring that up, right? One of the things that you and I saw was a certain organization was talking about living off the land, which again, like you said, is using tools that are already on the network, converting regular operating system tools. And we saw an organization review the whole entire attack of using the Windows Linux subsystem, and how, because they were able to use the Linux subsystem, it's wrapped in such a way that the EDR or antivirus wouldn't even know those tools are there because it's not part of the Windows OS. It's part of the Linux OS. It's built into the Windows, or I shouldn't say built in, adding it to it.
Okay, we've got to explain that one too, because
Yes.
that's a lot you just went through. So on Windows, of course, you have Windows, and you may know what Linux is. Linux is, it's another operating system. It's the free open source one, which is a whole other set of terms. And it's a Unix-like operating system, if you know what Unix was from a little while ago. Windows is interesting because Windows came out with something, or Microsoft came out with something for Windows a couple of years ago where it lets you run Linux inside of Windows. And it's actually really interesting the way it works because it's not virtualization. We've talked about that before. It's not like VMware where you get a whole host and a whole separate machine running it. It's actually this subsystem with some actually pretty clever technology that lets you run Linux within Windows, and it kind of runs as a, they call it a subsystem. It's kind of like a Windows application. But as Adam was saying, one of the problems is you have the tools of virtually a whole other operating system. And a lot of the tools that we'll put in to monitor Windows itself cannot see that stuff and will not notice it. So hackers may look at something like that and say, okay, maybe here's something that this is a way I can hide. They see that, say, okay, there are a lot of tools here I can use, and maybe this is something that they won't notice. So those are the kind of things that they do. The hackers hide in the gray areas. They don't do obvious things. They look into places where, and try to use things where, like, maybe there's not being looked at so much.
And as David, our friend, has said, that's called living off the land-ish.
Living off the land.
Land-ish. And
Land-ish.
And what that means also is, oh my God, a certain person, which I won't name, Dan, was picking on me during one of our conferences, one of our video conferences. And I decided to use one of our EDR tools, again, living off the land-ish, to...
An EDR tool, for everyone, is an endpoint detection and response.
God,
it's basically... I know, you got to remember the audience. And
sorry.
Basically, it's like antivirus, but it's antivirus on steroids. It's security software that goes on your desktop or on a server that will detect a lot of advanced attacks like malware and like a lot of these things we're talking about. So sorry, but
yes, right.
They'll look at the EDR tools.
So Dan, which was one of my colleagues at the time, great guy, smart guy. We love to play with each other. We love to, can I do this to that person? Can I shut them down? We probably shouldn't be doing it on our production network. But however, he was kind of muting me on Zoom or something, and I was getting kind of fed up. So I lived off the landish he thought by disconnecting from the network, from the VPN, for that moment, he thought he was safe. And I used our own EDR tool to shut down his system and cause it to be unstable, where he got kicked off the Zoom call. It took him quite a few minutes to get back. But the point I'm making is, if a threat actor can compromise your EDR console, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, well, that's kind of cheating too, because you had access.
I mean,
Yeah, well, cheating is what bad guys do too. But what I'm saying is, what he did was, we were. This was at a point where his victim was actually remote, was somewhere else, probably working from home or something, as many of us do these days. And so he was connected through a VPN. And so he thought, he realized Adam was probably going to try to poke at his machine, probably because Adam told him he would. So he disconnected from the VPN. They said, ha, I'm off. Well, it ends up a lot of these tools, they're designed to protect the machines, not just when they're connected through a VPN or when they're on the network, but also when they're on the internet. So Adam still had a way in to go and mess with the machines. But that actually shows you, the importance of, if you have security tools, you got to make sure they're secure. If a bad guy gets into your, security tools you're using to secure the machines, or even if they get into, like your management tools, the tools that you use to, that like your administrators or your, help desk people use to log into them, to log into machines, or to push software to them, or to, move files and stuff. That's what they're looking for. Stuff like that. Those are the things they're going to try to get into.
Like any weapon, it can protect you or it can hurt you. But so let me ask you a question. I have a quiz for you.
Oh, you're giving me a quiz? I'm always quizzing you.
All right, my quiz for you is this.
All right.
What is, speaking about my name in the third person, right? I think it is. What is Adam's favorite compromise? Favorite attack? What do I talk about often? Do you remember?
Okay, this is tricky because, Adam is playing with me here because, like, we have actually, notes, the things we're going to talk about, but I don't know if it's one of those two or if it's something else completely.
It's one of those two.
It's one of those two, and it's not the one we were going to talk about first. You are a devious guy. It's Stuxnet, isn't it?
Stuxnet, and I'm sorry, I'm just bringing it up because that is one of my favorite.
You set me up from the time we started.
Yes, I did.
Mapping out this episode. Well played. There we go. All right.
I just wanted to bring it up.
Here's to you. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
You got to be a little devious when you're in security. That's why it's cool.
You got to keep people on their feet. But we can go to the previous one. I just wanted to know.
No. Let's talk about Stuxnet. Doesn't matter. That's a great attack.
Me, Stuxnet is James Bondish or Jason Bournish or any of those agents, because not only was it conducted from a cyber warfare standpoint, but it was allegedly using human assets to help
Yes.
compromise. It is an
Yes.
amazing.
Well, it really is a spy story, and you're right. It combines both cyber and also human elements to it, which is really interesting. So you got a point there. Now, as far as I know, there were not any guns and
No, there was.
was there really?
At one point, they actually killed one of the nuclear scientists from that country.
Are we supposed to say allegedly? I don't know.
No, he was killed.
So
I don't
the
know who
story
did it. I don't
goes,
know
it
who
was
did it, but he was killed.
somebody killed him. He was
Somebody
okay.
killed him.
Fair enough.
And I think, if I understand correctly, and no one knows the exact motives, but since they were killed, it made it harder for that country to maintain their nuclear program. For those who don't know, the idea behind Stuxnet, and Stuxnet is not the actual name. I think it was called Olympic Gates, if I remember correctly.
Operation Olympic Games. That's what we
Games.
have
I'm
here.
sorry. And Stuxnet was derived from two gentlemen from Semantic. They were reviewing the code and they pieced together.
That wasn't derived. It was discovered by them. They didn't
Well,
make it. They discovered
no,
it.
they didn't derive the thing, but they derived the terms from seeing piece of code. I believe. I watched one of their movies a couple of times, but whatever the case is, they'll.
No. They had seen the code in the wild. They got samples of it. That's a
Yes.
lot of what security researchers do.
Yes.
They get malware, they get bizarre code, and Symantec is a security company. They make a lot of antivirus and a whole slew of other stuff. They're huge, and that's what security research. That's one of the things security researchers do is they get this code that's kind of dodgy or that is infecting machines, and they try to figure out what it's doing.
So they found Stux and they found Net and they put it together, but.
Oh, really? I actually didn't
Yeah.
remember that.
So
part.
the idea
Okay.
behind Stuxnet was to control the centrifuges and to make them spin both so slow and so fast it would make the centrifuges unstable and cause them to warp or to cease to function. And there's a whole story behind how they did that, right?
Well, let's just say what a centrifuge is for those who don't know.
Yes.
The attack for this was supposedly, well, not supposedly, but really, the Iranian nuclear program. And one of the things, if I do not know a tremendous amount about nuclear technology, however, one of the things you have to do is, refine or enrich uranium, which I think is to, get the isotopes that are actually fissionable that you can build a bomb out of. It's like some small percentage of it, and they use centrifuges for it. And as you can imagine, they're pretty sensitive. They need to run correctly. So these things futzed around with the centrifuges, basically.
So centrifuges, and I don't remember what they stand for, what the PLC stands for, but centrifuges. Let me Google what PLCs are, but they're controlled.
No, those are programmable logic controllers.
Yes, I always forget that.
They were messing with the electronic control systems of
Yes.
the centrifuges.
Yes, and what?
See, I know a few things too.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. So what the understanding behind it was, if you can get new drivers for these PLCs,
New control software.
yeah, new control software, drivers is control software. When you install your keyboard, you need a driver, which is control software. When you install your mouse, you need a driver. So what they did was they were able to work with assets to get into like yeah.
Human assets, you mean?
Yeah, human
people.
assets. Yes, absolutely. Maybe I'm drinking a little bit too much. Maybe I'm not explaining myself.
No, I think you just love the spy stuff. You got to remember that, man. Not everyone knows all this stuff,
So these human assets were able to get into kind of like these safes below ground or rooms below ground that are heavily protected, and they were able to get into those servers because that's allegedly the only way you can get to them.
They were not connected to the internet. They were smart enough to say they don't just put this stuff on the internet.
And I'm not even
they were
talking.
isolated.
And we're not talking about the uranium, the servers in the Iranian storage yet. We're talking about the drivers or the certificate servers, the ones that say that this software is valid software. They were able to get into the safes
Oh, so this was even the stuff to test the software,
Well, not
to
to
make sure
test.
that it was valid,
So
to verify it.
yeah. So those when you go to install an application, and let's say it's a camera on your machine, and you have to install a driver, which is the software that controls
The
it.
software to run it, yeah.
Yeah. When you go to install it, it says like authentic. You know, it's almost like going to a website, and it says this driver is authentic or is signed. Signed. You'll explain that in a second by Microsoft. Signed by whoever it is.
You've all seen it. It has some encryption, some cryptography that verifies that it is what it's supposed to be, basically.
So they were able to get assets to manipulate the software and to believe in it was valid, so they would install it correctly.
Ah, there we go.
Yes.
Okay. And that is not easy. Cryptography works.
Yes. So if you don't, so what happens when you don't have something that's signed? It pauses or requires validation, and you can't do it.
Well, yeah, under normal circumstances, you get the little pop-up that says, this is not trusted. Do you still want to use it? And everyone says yes. But
Yes.
in a high-security facility, they might be a little more careful with that.
So they got these software drivers. They signed them correctly. They were installed, and it tricked the uranium. It tricked the people in Natanz, the nuclear facility, into believing legitimate drivers. Nothing
Oh,
wrong
that the
with
software
it.
was good.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong here.
nothing
Okay.
wrong with it. Now,
Okay, so let me just stop. So already we've had two phases of the attack, right? But we haven't even talked about the reconnaissance because they figured out what they were using. They managed to get a human actors to get the software in and get the malware and whatever, and they were able to defeat the systems to to allow it to run. So they haven't even run the thing yet, and we already have a couple steps in this.
so the delivery method is also like great, right? To deliver these drivers, these applications into changing the centrifuge, they had to be delivered. It was on an air gap network. What's an air gap network, Joe?
An air gap network is when, well, it's not a network at all. It's when you have systems that are not actually connected by a network. The term is kind of funny because it comes from the old days when networks were only wired. So we'd say, oh, we have an air gap. The space between them was just air. There's no network. But it also refers to when there's no wireless network.
And sometimes, sometimes people call it sneaker net. And there's a reason why they call it sneaker net is you're literally taking
you're walking from one to the other.
one machine to the other and plugging it in. So they had to get that software into an air gap network that's not connected to the internet. And the story is that they did it by tainting USBs. The
USB thumb drives,
USB
basically.
thumb drives, yes. Which is amazing, right? So now we have assets getting applications onto USBs. We have assets getting into, what do you? I don't know. It's not a safe. It's like
into a secure facility. I mean,
Secure facility.
this is, and we're starting out with something crazy. This is, and you can tell already, this is an extremely difficult multi-stage attack. Everything's a multi-stage attack, but this in particular is really tough to pull off using a big mix of techniques and going through tough barriers.
Now, insert key term here. They compromised these networks once they got in there by using 0 days.
0 days, yes.
And supposedly, I don't remember the amount, the number. I'm sure somebody's going to end up giving us feedback on this. Supposedly, it was multiple 0 days, maybe 3, 4, 5, or more. I don't even know. And to have that many 0 days on an attack, if you're a bug hunter or whatever you want to call them, these 0 days are probably a minimum of $250,000 if you were to sell it on that sell it to somebody. So we're talking about millions of dollars probably worth of 0 days that nobody knew about, and they used that.
Right. So a 0 day attack is an attack where basically it's not generally known. It's known only to the people who discover it. And you may see in the news when they say, oh, there's a 0 day attack against this vulnerability patch. Well, they're freaking out because they figure out that the good guys, the vendor, whoever, just discovered it, but they realize that someone's already been attacking it, so that makes it really dangerous. Well, there is also, it was always speculated for a long time that certain intelligence agencies had a lot more 0 days that they were just stockpiling, that they weren't telling anyone about. But that was a little bit of a conspiracy theory until this came out. And it ended up that it appeared to be correct. But those things are really valuable. As Adam was saying, they're really valuable to attackers, but they're also really valuable to intelligence agencies because, they're unknown. There's no defense against them because nobody knows about it. They're hard to even detect when you get hit with them, unless they do something really obvious that you're going to notice. And they don't like to use too many of them because there's also a finite number of them. We don't know how many there are at any given time, but they're not endless and they're very difficult to find.
So they use multiple 0 days. They use human assets. They targeted one of the individuals from the nuclear facility and offed him. Is that the correct term? Offed him?
Offed him, whacked him.
Whacked him?
Whatever. But that's a mob term, not an intelligence term.
I was trying to be a little bit more
liquidated. Is that what they say in the movies?
Anyway. I guess they can say that. They liquidated the asset, or they made the asset no longer important. I don't know.
No longer alive. We're joking. This is serious stuff, really. This is talking about these things.
So, and they even were using reconnaissance. My understanding was, there were times when Iran was showing some of their capabilities and the assets that were targeting the Iranian power plants were looking at the reflections in the screens and counting the array and figuring that number out. But once they were able to determine what type of centrifuges they had to target those centrifuges. And they wanted to target the centrifuges in such a way that it would only compromise those centrifuges at that location without compromising or causing issues to anybody else in the world. And then not only that, but the vulnerability or the compromise or the malware had to stop working after a certain period of time, and they never did command and control. It never called in. Command and control, for those who don't know, means the software reaches out to a certain IP on the internet and waits for instructions. Well, this didn't. This had a life of its own. It had its own instructions and did what it had to do. I guess that whiskey's good, huh?
Yeah, it's smooth. Yeah, that's really good. And when they establish command and control, that means they can do stuff on it. But this particular one, because of the nature of it, especially because it was going into an air-gapped system, where there were no connections outside. Once the malware got in, it was on its own. And so it had to, operate by itself, which, again, is a sophisticated attack. They do that because they had to in this case, but also when you're on the defense side, one of the things that we look for is, that communication out, the command and control, that something is talking out to a place that's dodgy or it's doing some things that look funny that they shouldn't be doing. That's a big part of defense. And again, talking about the kill chain, and that's further on. A bunch of things have happened, but we can still catch someone and get in and detect them.
So yeah, and exactly right. Exactly like that. With command and control, if you're able to stop the connectivity out to that IP, you can possibly prevent the additional compromise or additional...
The IP, which means the address they're talking to, their command and control server.
Wow, I'm not good at this at all. And then...
Well, you are good at it. You just got to remember, I'm breaking it down for the people. This is for the people, not for us geeks.
I just wish I would get some fan mail, and then people say, Adam, we love that you throw those words out there.
Well, you sound cool, but we got to make sure people know what's going on,
Yeah, well,
Besides, people are getting drunker and drunker as they listen to this. So,
I hope so.
Keep it simple. I hope so. Really.
Let me take another drink.
All right, keep going.
So not only does the command and control work through this IP connectivity, but if you know the IP it's connecting to, you might be able to determine, and I know you're going to tell me this term, attribution. So, for those who don't know, attribution is connecting the attacker to the attack. Who's the
It's
attribute?
figuring out who did it.
Yes. Well, that's
Yeah.
a simple way of doing it, right?
That's the simple way of saying it. Yes.
So,
Yes, that's attribution, which is extremely difficult in many cases.
but even more difficult if it's not reaching out, right? It doesn't. So then, what these researchers did is they pulled apart that malware, and they try to do attribution through that, through the reverse engineering of the malware, which is not an easy task. And as people started ripping it apart, they started realizing that this is not a regular attack. This was an attack that was extremely sophisticated that probably went across multiple governments. Not one, maybe not even two, possibly three governments were involved in this attack. And they state that this attack was done in order to prevent the loss of further lives by using troops and having countries attack this nuclear facility. They didn't want certain countries to get involved in that. So this was done more in the dark than it was done overtly.
Right. Well, this is a spy story, and the only reason this got out was it's actually kind of interesting. Is that as you said, that it was designed to be very tight. It was designed to not go anywhere. It's designed to only hit specific things, but someone made a mistake, and it did get out, and that's why it got noticed, and that's how this whole spy story started to unravel into the public, and that illustrates another thing that as we're saying, these guys whoever did this, they were A players. Well, we know who did it, but they were A players. Very good, top of the line, very difficult attack, but even within that, you can have a mistake, and there are some consequences to it. You can expose yourself. It can cause attribution and make attribution easier, but it can also have some other unintended effects, which can be unpleasant. In this case, I don't believe it was known that it got out, and Symantec found it apparently, at least according to the story. But it wasn't. This one wasn't actually destructive, was it? Because it was so targeted for those particular things.
That's how it was written. It was written in such a way that the PLCs look specifically. The malware looked specifically at certain PLCs, whether it was serial numbers or model numbers, or however they really did it. And so it only targeted those for that facility. How they got those model numbers and how they got specifically to that IP range, just amazing.
So this is a case where it got out. It was discovered by someone with a keen eye, whatever. Probably not, as I recall, not super, not destructive on the outside, in the wild, as we say. When something gets out, we say it's in the wild out there. However, there have been other cases where things, malware, things that were maybe created by some intelligence agencies for their use, they have gotten out and have been quite destructive. And that's actually quite a big, point of discussion of these are powerful tools, and they haven't yet broken. Well, I don't think there's yet been a case where it's broken into the physical space where it's really hurt someone, but we have had things like we looked it up, the Eternal Blue exploit that was believed to be from a 3-letter agency, got out there, and the bad guy started using it and pulled off some big ransomware attacks on it.
Well, this is why this attack is one of my when I say favorite, I'm not saying that I advocate for what was done.
It was your intellectually favorite. You can look, even if you're on the side of the victim, who many of us listening to this will not be. But even from that side, you have to respect just the achievement. This is one of the most impressive attacks in history all around.
And Anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time publicly that we know about an attack that went from the cyber world to the physical world, and
That is true.
this
Yes.
has real life consequences. What if this was a natural gas manufacturing plant, and they decided to, and movies have done this. They decided to blow up that plant.
Movies.
What movies reflect, nonfiction, right? I mean, or they eventually become nonfiction. But what if some country decided to attack a utility, shut down that utility in such a way that it caused? And I understand we could talk about Ukraine and their nuclear. I mean, their power has been shut down and caused issues in other countries too. But what if they were able to blow up those plants in such a way that people got hurt? Horrible, horrible, scary stuff.
Oh yes. Reprogram systems or disable safety systems, fire control system, other safety type things, cause again something to, I don't know, overheat, whatever, overload the warp core, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, God forbid, one of those ships are traveling at warp 8 and boom, blows up right during the warp.
But this is for real, and unfortunately, it seems like we're edging closer and closer to this kind of stuff, and it makes it all the more important that, well, that we defend that on our side, we defend against it adequately for when our adversaries do it for us, but also that on the offensive side, for if and when we're doing it ourselves, that it be done in a careful way where it not only doesn't cause loss of life or excessive loss of life or civilian loss of life, but that those things don't get out and can't be used against us.
And that's the
pretty
point, right?
frightening.
So
They are becoming weapons.
we're moving from kinetic wars, and for those who don't know what kinetic is using physical attacks to more into the cyber arena, and the cyber.
Yes, kinetic war is normal war,
Yeah,
bombs and guns and all that stuff.
and now we're moving to cyber, and can you just imagine one day somebody gets upset, a nation state decides they've had it, and you don't see those missiles coming, you don't see the troops marching, you don't see the planes, you don't see anything. All you do is wake up and boom, that's it. And this is why when we talk about campfires, we talk about ghosts, and we talk about people walking that are headless, and all this scary fireside stories. This to me is one of those campfire stories where for those who were interested, the ramifications and the end result is beyond scary to me.
Yes, I think you're right, and I will also posit it to you and to everyone that lately the past few months here we've been talking about AI and the possibility of AI getting under control, and even the Terminator stuff, and they're becoming more real than we thought. This threat, though, this situation is actually much more immediate and much more real, I think, as far as the existing technology goes and what's actually happening. So this is going to get us all. Well, I don't want to say it, but I would say this is a bigger and more realistic and more immediate threat right now than any of the AI stuff. This is really real.
And
I mean,
yeah.
we've had. I mean, Adam, we've talked before. One of the things that Adam's really interested in is the connection between physical security and cybersecurity. And I never had a great appreciation for it until we started thinking about connecting building management systems into a network. A network to control them, to look at them and everything. I always said, "Oh, what's the big deal?" And from the places we've worked, suddenly the idea of someone hacking into the the air conditioning or the heating or the elevator control systems or the fire suppression systems in a 50-story building in Manhattan, or, wherever else we have tall buildings, or, London, or, the Middle East, wherever they have these things. That's for real. That's really upping the stakes. And it makes a strong case for really improving our security across the board. Not even getting into the exotic AI stuff. This is just the blocking and tackling in the game we're used to playing.
So any of these IoT or these Internet of Things devices, and that's basically anything that's connected to your network or internet, they usually have less security. So you could literally possibly be in a place where nobody's around. Not only is it dangerous that you can compromise these devices to hurt people, but they're also point of injuries, or you have the ability to introduce yourself into these systems through these less secure devices and get to the rest of the network. So there's a lot of things that can be discussed here. And yes, I know they were done in many TV shows and many movies. It's not beyond reality.
Well, including in, not to get too scary, but, it is true even in cybersecurity that life imitates art. It's amazing. Some of these things that people think up, they're actually trying it, and even scarier stuff sometimes. So
I know we should probably move on to one more case, but I'll tell you this last thing. Let me really scare you. Let me talk about the elephant in the room.
The pink elephant? Because I'm starting to see pink elephants.
I see green and
I see green.
red polka dot.
You got to change your lighting in there.
Oh,
right.
So my understanding is that most top nation states already have access to those facilities, and they plant those malware in there and wait for the day that they might have to use it. So in essence, it's almost like saying, I'm going to put a nuclear weapon that I can control remotely in another country by dialing it up on a cell phone, but instead now it's malware sitting in a nuclear power plant where you can have a nuclear breakdown, or it's in electrical plant.
You really think they have that?
Absolutely, 100%.
Really? Wow. That's devious and frightening, man. Well, I hope people,
Well, guess what? We're talking about on regular news now that we believe we really do have aliens on our planet. It's finally come out. We all talk about the boogeyman and aliens coming down, and ha ha ha, very scary. And now we have people, officials, that were involved in that saying we really do have aliens, and aliens are on this planet. And I know that sounds totally absurd to people, just like it's totally absurd to have malware in nuclear plants, in electrical plants, in dams, in control systems, in everywhere where they can be remotely detonated and cause havoc. So you never know. Maybe it is a story.
I want to say it's a little crazy, the whole alien thing. That is a whole other story that just came out. But the other day, we're in the midst of this. Well, it just ended, that whole wildfire thing. I walked out of a restaurant at lunchtime, in Manhattan, and looked up in the sky, and it was orange. I thought the world was ending. And I said, I said to the person next to me, I said, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in New York, but I never seen this. I thought 4 horsemen were going to come out of the sky. So, I don't know.
I saw them, but after drinking.
You saw them. They went to Staten Island first, right?
Yes. So what do you want to talk about next? What's the next one you want to talk about?
Okay, let's talk about something now it's a little less exotic, but it actually really shows a lot of the same things, the whole things of how an attack progresses and how you get in, and it's something that even impacted me personally, and that's the Target breach. So why don't you tell us about that one?
Well, my understanding is you were upset because you couldn't get the sale on Target stuff. That was what I heard about, but I don't know.
No, actually, well, this is interesting. I remembered I had used the credit card there, and they were saying if you use your credit card, it probably got compromised and everything. So, what do? I call the credit card company and I say, look, I was at a place, my credit card got compromised. Issue me a new one, cancel it. And and the credit card company actually told me, they said, look, the phones are ringing off the hook. We have millions of people doing this. Just sit tight. We'll take care of it, which they did. But that alone drove home the scope and the impact of this. And they were not dealing with nuclear reactors or anything, but this is a serious. Even if you couldn't care less about Target or whatever, this is a serious drain and had a many thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of people running around doing a lot of work who to deal with this. They could have been doing other things, unfortunately. So these things do have impact.
So we spoke about HVAC, right? And we spoke about IoT devices. With Target, it looks like
IoT is Internet of Things.
I did say it earlier.
Did you?
Yeah.
In this episode?
Yeah, I did.
No, that's when you have in not necessarily computers, but computers built into things like lights and control systems,
Yes.
and little doodads you plug in your house, all that stuff.
So this is a little bit different, right? We're not talking specifically about the IoT devices, but we're talking about the fact that there was a third-party company that was connected to Target that maintained the HVACs. And unfortunately, one of those employees clicked on an email, opened an attachment, was subject to a phishing attack, and that individual allowed the threat actor to get into their network and then move laterally into the Target network.
Well, we shouldn't necessarily say allowed. I mean, it's not like they.
Well, they
them.
didn't get
They
permission.
opened the door.
But they didn't get,
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't
But
get permission.
they were the point of, as we call it, the intrusion vector. The point where I'll use a big word. Okay, or the attack vector. They were the point where they got in. So it was, the thing is, we talk about, someone got phished. They clicked a link. Some malware got on their machine, and then bad things happened on their network. Well, it ended up that the bad guys actually got on their network. But then they went to Target. Then they went to one of that one of that company's customers that they had access to.
Yep. So from there, the malware was dropped. And what happened there, Joe? You tell me. How does your credit card feel?
How does my credit card feel? My credit card was very upset about this. This was an interesting one because when I first heard about this, I said, well, they must have gone into servers or something. They couldn't possibly have gotten it onto all the point of sale systems, the POS systems, which are the credit card swipers and things that you have. And if I'm not mistaken, with this breach, they actually did. They were that good. So basically, all of them, every time you swiped a credit card or whatever, boom, it was sending the information back to the attackers. And there's another one, pretty impressive, but scary. And again, a multi-stage attack where it wasn't just one hit. And this one actually, the way that they ended up, and we even described it more simply, between when they first got the phishing email and the malware ever compromised the vendor's machine, there were even a couple steps after that that allowed them to get into the Target network, pivot, move around, do all that, and eventually get to the point where they could start grabbing credit card information. So again, not something at the level of Stuxnet, but it shows you what these guys do, and that's not even sophisticated anymore. This is very routine. That they will once they're in. When you get it, ends up, we talked about living off the land. Once you get into the network, it ends up you have a lot to work with as an attacker, and that's what these guys do.
Yeah. So basically, we talked about in the past episodes about skimmers, right? You put a skimmer on a device, you put your credit card in, and it reads your data. This, in essence, is like an electronic skimmer. Every time data was written or data was read from point of sale systems, they were able to get that data and then use those credit card data to do things. And it's not necessarily a sophisticated attack, but it's an attack nonetheless that at the basic core of it is so simple, it just works. And that makes people a lot of money. So the motivation for the first attack, the Stuxnet attack, was more political in nature. The second one was financial in nature. People just wanted money.
Yes. Yes,
And
absolutely.
that's important to also differentiate. Why is an attack happen? Is it
Right. And
hacktivism? Is it
right.
politically based? Is it I just want cash?
So no, there were a couple interesting things about the Target attack, and it was that one was that apparently, and they caught a lot of heat from this, that apparently there was an alert that somehow triggered, and it wasn't acted upon. And you hear that, and this is where we got to stick up for our brothers and sisters in security, where you say, oh, they should have gotten it, but it's not necessarily so easy. Security systems generate millions of attacks, or millions of events a day with stuff. It's very hard to get down to the ones that are really significant, and sometimes the ones that trigger that might be an indication of an attack are actually low severity. Don't come up as boom, someone popped a machine, or boom, this big malware got on there. It could be something very small. I don't know what it was in this case, but going through all that chaff and getting to the ones that are really significant is a real challenge, and something that the bad guys take advantage to. The other thing was that they went to the point of sale systems, and I think one of the issues that they said was this could have been prevented, and this is a few years ago, remember. They said it could have been prevented if they had credit cards with chips in them, which we all have now. Of course, this was a few years ago. With credit cards with chips, they say, like they have in Europe. Well, this was also a case where the business needs bumped up against it. Where at Target, because of their business, they said particularly at the holidays, making the lines move quickly was important. So anything that slowed it down, and poor customer experience, possibly people just walking out of the store, lost business, saying the line's too long, it's too crowded, I can't do it. And when you're a security manager, when you're a chief security officer, it's really tough when you say, look, we have and we don't know what the discussions were internally about it and exactly how it shook out. But, those can be really tough discussions when you're saying, yes, we have an exposure, something big can happen. They say, yeah, but this is going to potentially cost us a tremendous amount of money in our core business. But again, that's something that the bad guys ultimately were able to take advantage of. They found it and they exploited it.
So
So
yeah, they had a little bit more color to it. So for those who are interested, the Target breach, the malware is called Black POS, but it's also known as Captoxa, and it's a point of sale malware that was designed to be installed on point of sale systems. And what it basically does is it scrapes the data from the credit cards or the cards that are used. The attack happened in 2013. But like this, the amount of surface area you have to protect. I always say this to you, Joe, and I know you don't like to hear it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Everybody's going to get compromised. Every organization will eventually get compromised or has been compromised, or they're not talking about it. And yes, you have legal responsibility to declare it. But if a nation state pretty much wants to get you, they'll find a way. Um, they might not get all the way in, they might get partially in, but you might get alerted to it. But pretty much, some of these nation states have a ridiculous budget, sometimes more of a budget than some of these companies do. It really depends what the reason for this attack is. And now I'm not saying this had anything to do with Target. I'm just saying that from a political standpoint, nation states, they're pretty good, depending on
oh
the.
yeah, was maybe the final set of scary thoughts that tie this together. Yes, if the nation state wants to get you badly enough, they have a lot of resources and a lot of incredibly smart people and a lot of determination. And as we've said before, they will get you. They are the toughest adversaries. On the other side, more on the Target side, it may have been, I don't know, that they made a very concerted, very thoughtful risk decision that, okay, we want to take this risk, we want to do it, we understand it, we're not putting in everything we can. But, one of the tough things about being in security, and, nobody likes to lose, and nobody likes to get hacked. It's that even if you've done all your risk management and said, we're making this decision, we've talked to the business, we've decided, this is the risk posture we want, and we're going to take this risk. When you come up snake eyes, it's no fun. And it is a possibility. It's going to happen to someone, statistically, and it might be you. So, Adam, that's scary enough for you?
I think so. I would love to get some feedback if people feel this is really scary or if they have more questions about this. Whatever the case is, I know that this is only the beginning. Even though we hear about cyber attacks all the time, they're only going to get more sophisticated and more dangerous and cause more harm. Especially,
right. We should also probably say, we're not really trying to scare you, but we are trying to drive home some of the reality of this, that that the challenges are difficult, and that they're not easy to solve. They're very difficult.
Yeah.
And that is and they're not just about technology and saying I'm going to do the best job I can and do all this. Well, it's quite a bit more complicated than that.
My disclaimer here is I'm not trying to sensationalize this for our listeners. This really does scare me. This really does keep me up at night sometimes. I think about it, and depending on the organization I'm working for, knowing some of the vulnerabilities or what's going on, it does keep me up at night, and I do think of ways to protect against it. So, yeah, I'm not just trying to get listeners. Joe, you know me, right?
We are trying to get listeners, but not by being sensationalist.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be sensationalist. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want more listeners, but
please listen.
But if you ever been to a campfire and they're telling stories about ghosts and stuff, to me, even though it's fun to hear those stories, this to me is much worse. This to me is
this is real.
This is real.
This isn't the Jersey Devil or anything. This is real.
And I said to a couple of my friends the other day, I go, we're living through some really tough times. Really tough times. As you look at the posturing of all our countries, the top countries in the world, and where they are and what they're doing, there's a little bit of anxiety there for me. So just being honest and being transparent.
Okay, well, fair enough. You're a thoughtful guy, and that's good.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't think we actually have a last call at the campfire. I think you just kind of say, that's it, we're done.
Well, if anybody wants to donate s'mores for the next campfire, I love s'mores.
That's great.
But yeah, I'd love to have some s'mores and maybe something else. Maybe something a little bit more sweet for my next drink. Sit by the campfire, have a s'more drink, tell some really bad ghost stories. But
there we go. Well, we will have many more stories, and maybe we'll do this again before the summer is over. It's still early.
Yes, sir.
This was fun.
Thank you.
All right, Adam, always fun. Good hanging around the campfire with you. And in fact, I got to check my air conditioning because I feel like I'm sitting next to a fire here. I don't know what's going on.
I know, right?
Someone must have messed. While we're doing this, did you hack into my thermostat and turn up the temperature? I don't know.
Oh, I still have my flip of zero. That's all I'm going to say.
There we go. All right, that's good to know. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Adam,
thank you very much. Bye.
Take care, everyone.